Good morning. Today is Monday, July 20th. Can't believe we're this far into the summer and also into the pandemic. Thought we'd be really clear of it by now, but it's not the case, but we press on. So let's look into the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6. So chapter 6, I told you it was coming. It's didactic, it's teachings and preachings. So the disciples are plucking grain on the Sabbath again. The leaders and overseers discover this, and Jesus has the opportunity to teach about what the Sabbath means, and he says he's Lord of the Sabbath. So puts his foot down about it. And then he heals the man with the withered hand. Same stories that we've seen in all synoptic gospels. And then it's selection time. This is a new thing. Selection time is the original draft of the Jesus team, all named the 12. And so calling the 12, naming them in Luke's gospel. Again, Luke is very intentional about proofs, about proving stuff, that these are the people who followed Jesus. Here is the evidence. This is Luke. They think possibly Luke was a physician, so he's a person that is trying to convince. Think about a physician before the scientific method, just be a little bit different. But then, trying to heal people with whatever they had at their disposal back then. Also trying to convince people, if you drink more water, it will improve what's going on with you. If you breathe the fresh air, if you go out into the sun, you'll get the right kind of vitamins that you need. So he lists all the disciples and what I'm calling the original draft, the Jesus team, and they're named. And then there's some again unspecified healings. He's healing many people, and then it's time for a sermon or two. Chapter 6. So we begin the sermon parts in chapter 6 with the blessings and the woes. So after he does some of these healings, he starts in with then he looked up at his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled." Then he goes on in the end. He says, "But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep." So, whereas in Matthew's Sermon on the Mount, there is just blessed are the, this one is blessed and then woe. So it's just sort of a negative component to the similar message from the Sermon on the Mount. Then there's a section about love for enemies. And it's similar to the other synoptic gospels. And then the part in here about judging. So judge not, condemn not, lest you be condemned or judged. And all of this goes together in one. There's a thread of thinking in all of this sermonizing that begins in chapter 6, verse 20, and then continues on for the rest of the chapter. Jesus says to them, the blessings and the woes, love your enemies, don't judge or condemn others. And this is the part where the speck in your neighbor's eye and you have a log in your own. And so it's why are you going to point out the speck in your neighbor's eye, but you're going to have a log in your own? And then a tree that bears a good tree does not bear bad fruit, and a bad tree does not bear good fruit. So that's just where he is with a good person out of good treasure of the heart produces good, and an evil person out of evil treasure produces evil. For it is out of the abundance of heart that the mouth speaks. And so he's talking about people in terms of the trees and what kind of fruit they bear. And then this is the part I wanted to focus on today, was the two foundations. So we've heard this story before, and it's been made into songs and other kind of stories. And he says, someone who is like who comes to me, I will show you what someone is like who comes to me, hears my words, and acts on them. This is Jesus saying to them, someone who is like me, the person who hears my words and does what I say is like a man who built his house on solid rock. And when the floods came, the house did not get demolished. But someone who hears my words and he listens, but does not do what I say, is like someone who built his house without a foundation. And when the river burst against it, immediately it fell and was great ruin to the house. So we think about, like, how are you building, there's another story where a wise man built his house on a rock and this foolish man built his house on the sand. And it's a similar kind of story here. But in this passage, it's really more about hearers and doers. That should be like the little title of this section, hearers and doers. So everyone's a hearer in this scenario. It's kind of like a parable. Everyone's a hearer, but only the people that build their house on the foundation are the doers. And those who do what Jesus says, like they not only hear it, but they do it, will have that foundation. So when the floodwaters come, they will be able to manage it. Now, this may look originally like it is a reward and punishment type of thing, where if you do the good thing, then God will protect your house. It's sort of like a contractual situation. Like most people would think that, because that's the way we think. God doesn't seem to be like that. In the Gospels, it's just like sending Jesus to begin with and all that, and grace and mercy. So God is always going against what we think would be like justified and right. Take, for example, the parable of the vineyard owner who goes out and hires the laborers in the morning, and then in the afternoon, and then in the evening, and pays them all the same. It's that kind of mentality that God's more gracious and generous than that, and he can't really get to the heart of who God is by this contractual situation. So what he's saying is, all these things I said to you, woe to you, love your enemies, do not judge lest you be judged. Think about the plank in your own eye before you point out someone else's speck. These things that I'm telling you to do, if you do them, your life will be better when the floodwaters come. So you see, it's not like a reward for doing the good thing. It is actually the way to live in the world, to be strong should the floodwaters come. And now we know this from science, psychology. We know this from sociological studies, in that if we act in ways that are compassionate and kind and empathetic, we're better to sustain our relationships. And when the floodwaters come, it's okay. It's more okay than it is for people who live in a zero-sum game world, dog eat dog, we're out to get you, we're against you, and then the floodwaters come. Who's going to be there to help you bail the water and build lay the sandbags for your house? Your relationships will be severed. They won't be good. You won't have a standing in your community, or even the internal emotional support that you need to get through the hard things. The floodwaters come to both houses. But the one with the foundation is the one that does the things that Jesus says here in chapter 6. So chapter 6, good teachings. There's more great teachings in the Gospel of Luke. I'm telling you, this is the parable gospel. So we're just getting started. Happy Monday.